Hello again, everyone. Uh, Today we are starting a final review of the synthetic intelligence workshop that we are running within the Digital Future um, initiative. And this workshop is organized by Synthetic Landscape Lab. And I'm happy to introduce you today all the team who was taking part within the workshop. And Claudia was maybe before behind the scene, but she's definitely one who is inspiring us and bringing first of all, the agenda and leading the Synthetic Landscape Lab. And as well as Institute of Urban Design at the University of Innsbruck. So I'm happy to introduce you all, Professor Claudia Pasquero. Claudia is one of the pioneers, I think, of the biodesign, and at least for myself, this lady was the first inspiration and the person who brought me into this field. And Claudia is head of the Synthetic Landscape Lab and Institute of Urban Design at the University of Innsbruck, as well as she is a co-founder of Ecologic Studio in London and director of the Urban Morphogenesis Lab in Bartlett UCL, as well as faculty at the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. And probably I'm forgetting some other schools that Claudia is lecturing and giving classes. So I'm happy to introduce you, Claudia, and introduce you to other students. We also have today Oscar. Oscar is a ex-partner. I just not get to know today that ex-partner of ex-colleague of Ecologic Studio. He was taking part in many latest projects of Ecologic Studio, as well as his faculty at the UCL Bartlett. And we will also today have Vadim Smachtin joining us probably a bit later. And Vadim is my colleague as well as Artem's colleague within several Russian academic initiatives as ITMO University Art and Science Program, as well as we are running and one greatest art initiative called DigitalSenNet together. So he will join us in a bit. And of course, Artem Kunivskih, who was here all the days with us. We were preparing all these workshops and the codes and the Python together with Artem. And I don't think that I need to introduce you to the students, but just since we have an online event, I need to say that Artem is the greatest artist and the designer, the computational designer, who is working with lots of Russian artists, collaborating with them within the projects, taking part within all the machine learning that they're doing. And he's currently working at the Strelka KB team, working on the urban scale, as well as being a part of current CAM team, who is also working internationally, divided between the Asia, Europe, and Russia. So yeah, and within the workshop, we were discovering some machine learning tools that we were developing together with Claudia and Artem, and introducing it to the students and seeing how we could with this machinic intelligence and with algorithmic design could extract the intelligence of the biological patterns, how we could read maybe the landscapes, how we could read the microscale of the biological structures in order to read this pattern and translate it into the design process. We had just a few days of the workshop, so we didn't have a chance maybe to work the projects, and we would say we will have some sketches and a glimpse of the projects rather than like of the ideas rather than fully developed projects. But anyhow, I'm very happy to give the word to our students. And today we have Anai, Selina, Katerina, Theves, and Julia working with us. Guys, I would propose that we maybe divide our presentations in two parts, that we have a bit of more content to discuss. Traditionally, I invite Anais to start the presentations because she's always the first presenting within this workshop. And I give you permission to the screen and we can start the presentations.
Hi. Okay, I'll share my screen.
And maybe just to add, of course, the aim of today is to open up a discussion rather than to give a critique maybe to the work, but share the ideas, share the knowledge, and discuss your work together. So everyone, you are welcome to join to any of the comments and any of the conversation.
So I decided to focus on an image data set of satellite images of Arctic sea ice. So as a subject, I thought it was interesting as kind of a symbol of the current disruptions to our planetary systems, let's say. So this is the image dataset that I started with when training the GAN algorithm. And this is a selection of images that I decided to work with to then start generating geometry. Oh yeah, the videos are not working. So I'll just show two videos that I generated with the GAN interpolation algorithm.
Just maybe to comment as well for Oscar, who was maybe not inside of the process and not inside of the methodology, we are using StyleGAN in order to enlarge the data set and like create new artificial structures.
Yeah, so we then generated a three-dimensional point cloud to work with and create some meshes out of. So this is the mesh that I decided to work with, and then what I did is I subdivided it into 3D Voronoi cells. The idea was to try and aesthetically work with the idea of the ice, the melting, the cracking. And so from there, I just generated a few, rendered a few images of those different subdivisions. So the original point cloud was subdivided into 6 different parts. And then I just have a few images of these objects. So yeah, this is it. This is as far as my exploration went.
How would you discuss it? How was you imagining this type of the object to be actualized? Are you imagining it as a structure to be built as a component system, or what was the aim?
Yeah, I think it could be, or maybe some kind of a smaller object that can be maybe used as some kind of puzzle, or an object that can maybe be manipulated to break apart, basically, to translate this idea of the ice cracking and melting. This was the basic idea. I mean, that just came about while exploring the different possibilities with the definitions and algorithms that we were given.
Okay, thank you, Anais, very much for the presentation. Should we see next presentation of Thevis?
Okay, I share my screen. Okay. Anyone can see my screen now?
It's starting. Just a few seconds.
Okay.
Loading.
Hmm.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
it.
What I have prepared for dataset is the galaxy and some of a nebula cluster, because I think of this just like an intelligence that out of our understanding, just like that they are definitely a life, but that we cannot understand because it's our reach. So I want to know that what if we use that this pattern or this texture to do something, and then after train for a while, this is the first iteration of training. It's because of its using the style transfer, right? It's of people, but and the texture is we can see that you can see some of people face, and in the galaxy is for me it's really interesting. And then this is the maybe 16 iteration, and it took around 22 hours. And another, this is a generation of the StarGAN. Below, cannot below. And this generation is quite, I don't know why it doesn't work. Maybe I can show some of the this one. This is the generation of the StarGAN.
We have
Sorry, we
seen.
don't see your video. We just see the browser window. Maybe you should share the whole screen, not just one.
So wait, pause, new share. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, okay. This is the result of the StarGAN, and it's looked really interesting. We see a lot of variation and the texture of the galaxy of the cluster. And then after that, I try to take these images to turn to the point cloud. And after that, just we use the same same strategy to turn this point cloud into a voxel. And I try to subdivide, and at this time I try to play with the size of this cell. And finally I asked myself, what can I do with this model? And what?
Can you go to the full screen?
Okay, okay. This quite slow, I don't know. Yes, this is the model out. I extract the color first is black and white and RGB, and this green one is kind of like the green landscaping or something. It's really interesting. And then I try to do a text color made that divide to the 3x3, and it's when I look at it, it's just like a cave that the ancient cave. And if we walk through this cave, it's just like because of the image of this the point cloud is generated from the galaxy, right? So it's just like it map to this structure, and it's just like revolving through this galaxy. And this is the some of the exploration I do with this model. That's it for me. Okay, screen.
Thank you very much, Davis. So,
Okay, thank you.
well, let's choose one more person in this team. Who wants to join now?
I can.
Okay, Katerina, super. So,
Sure. So previously I have a board. I created an entity for marine environment, synthetic entity, and I decided to continue this work with some small
Sorry,
introduction.
I guess you also share just one window, not the whole screen, so we don't see the slides.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
do a new share.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe stop sharing and then do a new sharing, and then you need to select all your desktop. Maybe it would be better, and share with us full of your screen.
What about now?
Yeah, now we have it.
Right.
So previously I had a work, I made an entity for marine environment, synthetic entity, and I decided to continue this work with the small iteration. That's why I decided to choose a data set which contains from shards of waste plastic measured in millimeters, which becomes a habitat environment for marine.
Millimeter, I think is nanoscale, this image, no?
Yeah, probably.
Some of them is nano.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nanoscale.
I just choose several of my data set. Yeah. So this is my real images. This is my pre-trained model. I'll show you just 2 videos as the result of training. And another one. So this is the final images that I work with. My point cloud was probably black and white, and I divided and choose a small piece. But then I select only white of them, light of them at the core of the structure. But it was still too heavy, and I choose just a very small piece of my point cloud. And then I just decided to play with this piece, how it can work and how it can make a symbiosis with different marine microorganisms. I used pufferfish, culebra, and I implement an additional structures covered with this plastic and an additional type of trajectory of microorganisms, for example, or something like this. So this is the final result. that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina, for the presentation. And thank you, Anais and Teves as well. I think we could maybe open up for a short discussion around the projects. And I think that for such a short period of time, you've got great steps. Maybe some of them more rationalized and driven by maybe Katerina has this idea of kind of bringing the idea of the kind of this artificial elements of the marine environment forward, and thinking how they could evolve and find a symbiosis with different creatures. And I find how you're quite interesting. How do you drive it? This aesthetics from the video to the final meshes. Maybe I would, if I would take the kind of myself this decision, I would probably focus on the different pieces as well of the marine environment rather than just the microplastics. Now, I would probably look as well, how do we extract the information about the, hello, Vadim as well, is joining us.
Yeah, hi, everyone.
So yeah, I would maybe probably look to the also not only the kind of plastics which are present in the marine environment, but if you are looking into the this kind of symbiotic processes within the like within the sea, what is the what are you looking for? What is the logic that you want to bring into your design piece that you're trying to read? So, but of course that was quite difficult to do it within this short period of time, but it's more recommendation for the next steps. Now, if you want to continue your project that you were showing in the first slide, what is triggering your experiment? And I think this is important for everybody. When we are starting to work in this type of methodology, that I think the database that you've selected is very much like driving your next steps. And I'm curious how, for example, Anais could translate this idea of the ice formation, of the cracking, to the design. How would you imagine? How would you imagine the next design steps in this scenario? So to Teves, I have a comment of the, well, of course you have a beautiful database of the galaxy, and the style gun is quite impressive to see. And I also very much appreciate that you went to this kind of generation, not of the tile, not of the squared images and squared videos, and I think you all have done that, but of the generation of this continuous pattern with a style gun, which is also, I think, gave you very good result. I open for maybe comments and some questions from the jurors and from the guests.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm somehow more familiar with the type of pattern Anais and Elina are working on, and rather than galaxy pattern that not very clear how they've been recorded, how they've been framed, so it's more difficult, in my opinion, to work with. And I think one suggestion for the future would be, though, for everybody, for example, Anais had a nice catalog of the cracking as input, but then when we look at the output and also the 3D morphology, we look at it from all these different angles, and we can't really recognize the pattern. So when we look at architectural morphology, if we start from a discourse on visual pattern, I think we should end with a discourse on visual pattern. So also on what could be a 3D morphology or a proposal that come out from the workflow, I think it would be important to have view that allow us to see this pattern again, rather than start to see this as an object all of a sudden, to see more the pattern and how they relate to the morphology. My second question, and this was more of a comment, I would say, but the second is more of a question for all the three, is how do you relate the initial pattern in terms of narrative to the 3D morphology that come out, all the process, and how do you evaluate it? So what is the value of starting from pattern and then obtaining a 3D morphology in terms of workflow? Well, of course, there is an inherent value in the fact that in architecture you deal with certain type of morphology, but then what do you retain in terms of process from the original pattern?
So I guess my original pattern is not really recognized in my final result. This is just my decision because of it was a short time and it was a heavy point cloud. I decided to play actually in my usual style, as I usually use Culebra or multi-engine plugin. So in this case, it was really not so clear to recognize the basic pattern.
Well, maybe the question would be not necessarily how do you actually recognize, but maybe how would you drive it forward? No, what, like, we understand the limitations of the workshop and that, yeah, we couldn't do several iterations of the steps now. And when you see the process now, for example, the moment would be to probably, well, or at least from the very beginning, that would be probably the best way to stay longer with the dataset selection, with the narrative, no, that we didn't have a chance to stay there, and then start designing from the very beginning. So yeah, but the question maybe could be related not only to your final outcome, but potentially how would you translate it?
Yeah, I think it was quite interesting. Thank you for the presentations. I think that it's really interesting that Anais and Thebes both worked more into a landscape type of project, like they were imagining. Thebes was imagining this cave relationship about this transforming from this galaxy into habitats, which is quite interesting in a way that you can transform that this new galaxy extracted from the style gun becomes this new type of habitats. And Anais, I mean, the iceberg or becomes this, yeah, this new landscape. And on the other hand, Katarina did more into what I try to understand it could be something more of a material or a complement in the landscape. It could be something that we found like a type of new type of rock that it's, I don't know, together with the ocean and the marine environment that you took your inspiration. But in the three projects, I agree with Claudia that there's still this step missing from passing the first images that you did in the using the style gun to the final object. Like the texture becomes really different to what was originally. And I think that's the interesting part, and that needs to be considered with the narrative. How do you transform, for example, in the iceberg? How do you see the iceberg on the final result? Is it more into the texture? And on the galaxy also, like how is the galaxy being transformed into the final resolution? And yeah, and the same comment with Katarina, that how this marine reference becomes the texture or the final model.
Yeah, I would say that maybe we were even not trying to make the projects within this stuff, but maybe we try to make just like to develop the language of these drawings, which is connecting three parts, from the data collection to the style gun and then to the mesh. So, and I think that guys have like successfully completed this part, and now it's actually, yeah, so all these questions to you now is to maybe bring you to the next step and think, how could you implement this methodology in your designing? How can you take a control of it? Now, how can we start checking the amounts of iterations, the different settings of the code? How can we control more the style gun from just the video, which creates you quite a funky and beautiful results? No, but until which extent can we take this under the control and get the patterns that we could be using in the design process. Now, how can we, through the set of the iterations now of the this kind of meshing, how can we bring it to the result that will actually make sense and will have the correlation with two previous steps. So we didn't work that much on the rendering, and maybe it was on purpose to give you time to just push these three parts, guys, and get some just correlation between them three and place them together. So yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Artem, do you want to add anything?
I just want to add that really like the project that Anais made, because I also had some ideas to make something like that, but the only like the difference is that if I would make such type of the project, I wouldn't use satellite images of this scale, but I'd collect the data like on your first slide where you can see the whole Arctic Sea and the ice coverage of the whole Arctic Sea, and train style gun on this kind of images, so you can see the how this pattern is changing over time and how we can imagine how it can develop. Maybe this, yeah.
It would be maybe also great to change the scale now and look to the ice formation in a different resolution and a different scale. And yeah, maybe through this different like multi-scale steps to find the design strategy. So that's also could be the inspiration for your next project.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Tevez. Thank you very much, Anais. Thank you very much, Katerina, for the presentations. I would ask maybe Elena to continue with the presentations. So now Vadim also join us, so please jump in. You are familiar with the methodology, so I think it won't be problematic to follow for you.
No problem, please. Okay.
I decided to work with microscopic photos of cells that was prepared by Maria and Artem. And it's reels from my data set. And this is what I got from after training of my style gun. And this is some examples of my results. And what I noticed and what I realized when I got it, that I can't recognize it, my data set, and if I don't know what it was, I can't say what is it, like what is it, it's a landscape or it's something microscopic. It looks similar. And I want to show some videos of my results. I think it looks very abstract. And the next step was creating point cloud. I did my first step, and I think it's not so interesting. That's why I decided to create another one, and I think it looks more interesting. And what I noticed when I was working with point cloud, that it looks like a landscape, and I like to walk inside this model. Yes, and it was my final step. I didn't have time for preparing my final mesh, but for me, what was interesting that microscale looks like environment, and I would like to continue to work with my model and think more about how these microscales can shape and organize environment around me. Maybe I am going to find a place and I'm going to explore micro level of this space, of this environment, and to use this data set for creating my new point cloud and for next steps. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for the presentation. Maria, you said something, but your mic is off and we didn't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you, Sanchez. Thank you very much, Alina, for the presentation. Julia, do you want to present next?
Sure. Can you see it?
Yeah, super.
Okay, so I used for this exercise my own database, and I was quite interested because I've tried to find the bridge between making bacterial cellulose, producing it in the DIY method at home by everybody, and also the lab method that's like, it's very precise and it uses like high quality microscopes, FTIR testing and everything. You can see my reels and my generated fakes and where I stopped with them. I thought it's quite nice to see a comparison between the reels on the top and the generated seeds, the fakes at the bottom. These are parts of the training process with the faces that I thought was really interesting in the way that the program was training itself to recognize more the texture of the cellulose instead of the faces. This is part of the training iterations in videos that I thought was really interesting to observe how in the beginning you can still see the faces. In the second part, you can see the differences in the shapes and textures, and you can still distinguish what is made by hand and what is made in the lab. But in the last one, everything just goes together and everything is blended. So I thought that was quite a nice interpretation of the samples. Also, it was really interesting for me to see that the process of going through the creation of GANs and turning them into point clouds, making them a mesh and making them a model was really similar to the intrinsic just creation of bacterial cellulose, because you go from cells to clusters and then to a membrane. These are some of my point clouds. They're not very colorful, but I thought they have really nice layouts and they look like a landscape. This one's the one that I use the most for the mesh extractions. Went through it with the voxel selection, Weavebird, and as a model output. Most of them lost their color on the way, but I tried to change to invert the color so we can see more details in the model. This looks very much like the way the membrane looks inside of the bacterial cellulose, because it in the gaps it has sugar to feed on it. So I thought this part was quite interesting. Also, as I've already said, I see a lot of patterns that are basically biomimicry because they imitate a lot the membrane itself. So I was really pleased that the training and everything that we did, the synthetic part understood the real part. I played a bit with arraying and randomizing the top of some of my models. And this was some insights from the generated meshes. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much, Alina, for the presentations. Very beautiful and very suggestive. I don't know, maybe I open for the first comments from the guests.
I think I can comment. So I mean, the results are quite beautiful. So, but I think as always in our discussions, what I'm kind of want to see maybe from your side, or maybe from your side in the future. I mean, from your future self, like how you see this. I think it's a question like how you see this new materialism appears in the practice, because basically what you're doing, you're experimenting with the material, with a digitized material, and then creating a new materialistic structure. I'm wondering, how do you see the structure appearing? So I heard that it's basically can be an organizational pattern for a landscape, for example, right? Which is true and not true. I think, I mean, when you're looking at it, and it's interesting how, I mean, how you're imagining this landscape. So what is it? And for the second presentation, I'm wondering, so how basically this new material can be used. I mean, what is this? It's basically a hybrid one. So it's physical and digital, both, right? So, and it's interesting how you see this materialization will be used in the future.
Can I answer? I would like to do something with the digital space. It could be augmented reality or virtual reality. I'm thinking more about augmented reality with glasses, like installation, maybe in one place. And you can see with AR augmented reality glasses, like invisible level of this space with bacteria, for example, or microbiomes. Yes, and it's like something additional to physical space.
Thank you. Yulia, you want to comment as well?
I think for my exploration, it was, I'm not sure how to say it. I think I need to train the program more and to see more outputs, because I mean, my data set of images was quite small, and I'm not sure how I would see it, because at this point, through this training, I observed that the program understands the material the same way that the material exists in reality. So I think this is a bridge between both virtual and reality. So I think that's a way that I can explore more. But I think I need to do more testing to see if that's quite the case, or it was just like a lucky finding.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting how it bridges the physical structure with its virtual counterpart. And I mean, as a suggestion, what can be, if you look at this as intelligence, what I'm thinking right now about is like this objects that you're creating, this kind of patterns, they can be used as basically a rule setters. So a kind of pattern that basically creates a rules, which can be a simple one and a complex one, whatever you want. And then these rules can be basically materialized through the kind of execution of these rules by a different agency, for example. And in this case, the material itself, it's stopping to become like a brick or something. Instead, it's basically becoming something like a controller, something like an intelligence by itself, which is controlling the other type of agency by its own patterns.
Yeah, that's I think a great comment. And if I could join, maybe, I don't know, I was, Julia, when I was looking to your presentation, some of the last drawings suggested me maybe like I was starting to imagine a prototype for like maybe a fabrication of your microbial structures. No? And I think this steps could be quite helpful for you. It's just, yeah, it's true that we need to learn how do you control the algorithm more and how do you get till this result. But I think that especially this kind of spiky black and white models, I think there could be bringing this research that you were doing previously forward. I think that you need to maybe rethink a bit of like all your materials and be quite brave of removing some stuff which is just not working and which is not helping you, and concentrate on some of the drawings that you've created more and push them forward. So I think in your for you, I think it's very important. I was also quite enjoying that you're making these 3 videos, like a diagram showing us how the process of training is working. Basically here you are looking into the technical aspects of the code that we were using. So basically we were using the StyleGAN code, which is pre-trained on the faces. Basically it already has its own intelligence on that, but it's logic, it's base, and we were converting them into the instrument which will help us to design. And I think this middle step that you were pointing out is specifically kind of beneficial for you and useful for you, the step when you still control the pattern, but you're already losing kind of the previous training there. And regarding to Alina's presentation, I would suggest you to maybe observe the drawings that you've done a bit more, because you have a really amazing visuals of your StyleGAN. I think the data set, well, I know that we prepared that, but still you chose that. It's still very successful. And I think it could, with more attention to that, bring you to to some beautiful steps in the kind of possibly in the design proposal. But maybe I would even not look at that as a point cloud, but I would look at the drawing that you've created out of the StyleGAN and work with this drawing and maybe redrawing it. And you've selected quite a beautiful shots, several of them. And it's actually a good step that you've pointed that these are the most important for you, and start redrawing them and look at them. And maybe here I would concentrate in your case.
Yeah, Claudia.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for the presentation. I think there were some beautiful image. In the first case, I think I struggle again when we go to the 3-dimensional structure. It's okay. You can explore it in VR or AR or whatever. But then why? What are we looking at? I mean, I think there is a relevance in being able to interact with information that we are not able to see in the city. But then we need to be specific on which type of information and what do patterns tell us. Otherwise, we add to the noise. We risk to create visual pollution, in bracket. I know, it's not a comment on your project, but it's a comment on the redundancy of information of the planet we live in and production. So, and also, the whole system consume energy, etc. So if you do it, then you need to have a point which, it's clear. And I think there is a point in being able to interact with elements that we don't usually see. So augment them. This pattern in pre-industrial society, humans were able to interact with this pattern because they would, at the moment we are not moving, so maybe we go back to that and we don't need that anymore. But we will not move from a certain space, certain social condition, certain urban context for all their life, but not only for all their life, for generation. So they were able to read patterns that we are not able to read anymore. I make a very simple example. If I grow up in a place, my mom grew up in a place, my grandmother grew up in a place, I just look at the clouds and I know instantly if it's going to rain or not. If I move continuously from one place to the other, I don't, because I'm not related to that place. That is maybe a banal example, but there are millions of others. There are patterns in the environment that surround us that we are able to read if we have a certain physical relationship with them. And I believe that the transformation of pattern, the reading a pattern, can enable us to read more. But if it doesn't enable to read more, to interact more, then it's just a pattern. It can be beautiful. I'm good with that. But then what? I think for me there is a question in that sense. In terms of Giulia, I think somehow maybe out of pure luck, because the microbial cellulose look a little bit like skin. So there was somehow, I think, hidden there some sort of into a project. I started to imagine that maybe the project could be designing, I don't know, a pandemic mask that is made of a material that is disposable, but then this other substratum emerged. So again, it became less clear. Some of the images of the substratum, the latest one, are also cute, but then how do we relate them to the pattern of the cellulose? For example, I think I have some cellulose here. I think the larger piece I grow. And how do we relate it to that? Is it something that relates to maybe to its possible growth, to its possible drying more than growth, because the cellulose grow in water and etc. But there are, when it dries, in relationship to airfields, in relationship to morphology, it relates with, it shrinks more or less in relationship to that. So there are elements that start to suggest, but they are not clear. And you talk about testing. And again, in that sense, I have the same criticism of Elina when she said VR or AR. What do we test? Because I'm good with experimentation, but I think there is a certain level of experimentation that you can try to drawing by being more systematic in drawing, but there needs to be also some brief that enable you to experiment. That doesn't mean there needs to be a precise scientific research question, but there needs to be a brief that guides your experimentation. Otherwise, it's hard to experiment, I think. So on one side, it's about sharpening, I think, the visual language. On the other, it's also about defining a brief that allow you to, close a moment in the story and then maybe pick up another story. But, you have a design that is there. This is my comment. I don't know if the student want to comment something.
Thank you, Claudia, for the comments.
It's interesting. There is an interesting story about this cloud thing. Is that when you collect the data from a physical object, it still has a locality. So this is a relatively fresh problem in a big data field, which basically means that we cannot kind of scan the whole Earth through the data infrastructure and showcase its three-dimensional form. because other physical, every physical part of the world is different in terms of like a digital structure, and in this way it will be represented differently. So, and this is a huge problem, which basically says that all the data that we are collecting as the cloud in this example is tied to a specific place and to specific structures that produced it.
I think that's something that I realized with Elina's presentation is that the depth of the style gun had lots to do on the result of the three-dimensional result. And as Claudia said, for example, in Elina's presentation and Katarina's presentation, I think the change into the 3D model was not expected for me compared to the style gun, because the style gun had really amazing depth. Like you can see the three-dimensional space, even though it was a 2D video based on 2D images, which I think is something that's really amazing. If you are able to move the parameters or to program the style gun to have this depth, then that is, I think, a good point to start from there, as Claudia suggested, about the transition into the 3D space. It can be not only by a 3D point cloud, but also through the image, and try to extract from the sole image that you produced. And I think, yeah, as in the case for Julia, one of the videos I saw kind of like a face. It was like transforming this kind of face on the first video, and yeah, it looked like skin, which it was really good definition. So I think like overall the style gun worked really good, and it was just the transition from the style gun to the 3D model that I think sometimes it was a big jump, because the style gun images were really, really nice and they came out really good. So yeah, that's my only comment.
I wonder if we apply the structure from motion algorithm to reconstruct 3D model from the style gun video directly. I'm not sure it will give any adequate results, but it might be interesting.
It's actually it's great also for us to get the comments on the technique itself, and also feedback from the guys, and because it's like, yeah, I think that we are like on the development and we are looking to the maybe new methods of designing. I think it's a kind of the aim to maybe develop a new instrument which is not truly working maybe in all senses, but all depends how do you control it and how do you implement, what do you aim, and what are you doing it for, as Claudia was questioning. So, and there is not one decision and one kind of solution how to drive it forward, but we should definitely try the suggestion of Oscar as well. So
I think there is, sorry,
yeah.
no, just really quickly, because I think that's one of the main issues right now with the transition between AI to something physical, is that how do you translate directly like this images produced by style gun, cycle gun. I think that's something that many people have been questioning or having these difficult thoughts on how to translate from one to another without being this huge jump or this going outside of the original experiment. So I think that's something that we're still developing right now in this synthetic intelligence way of producing.
But
Yeah,
for me, it's a kind of, sorry, Maria, go on.
Just one sentence, and of course that's the absolutely problematic when we are going to the three-dimensional scale. No? When we're working with the image, maybe here we've got the control, got the variety, how to work with the database. We understood all the biases of the training, but then how to go to the three-dimensionality and to not lose the quality, to not lose the resolution, to not lose the control. Absolutely, like to not be absolutely out of control. And here I think the question that we were facing when we were starting to work on this technique, like how do we bring that? We were checking the 3D gun, and we were seeing that that's, yeah, gives us just a blurriness and well, it's absolutely out of the control. And we started to experiment with the style gun, and we're thinking, okay, here we have a chance to control and like the resolution and actually bring the logic. And there is a, like now we, of course, we are showing just a few iterations of these steps, but I think that guys in the next steps of the kind of trials and experiments could bring this to the quite a good quality of the results. But yeah, that's all up to the discussion. Vadim, I interrupted.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to do a quick comment. So I think we are going in like a black hole when we are starting to think how we will kind of convert the different algorithmical things, especially such abstract like this, into material objects. And I thought about it like a month, really. And now I came up with the idea of a kind of materialization through the set of rules. So, and the idea is basically that the materialism inside of the current digital agenda right now, it doesn't require you to have a material thing. Instead, it's required to have a set of rules which basically work as a material. So it's the same thing as with NFT. So basically, the idea is that you own something immutable, transferable, shareable, etc., 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 but it can be immaterial. Still, you can print it, you can convert it, but this is not a materialization itself. It's basically like a copy mechanism. But the materialization comes when the rules are starting to click. And basically, this is how I see the AI materialization in general. So basically, this is of rules is starting to click and plug at some point. It creates a structure which is material because it can be immutable in regarding to several set of technologies, which can have a set of kind of agencies, a set of rules. It can be presented in the court even. So at some point, but still, I mean, it's not a material in our sense. So and maybe that's the future of architecture as we see it. So it's not like it's still building. I mean, but it's not a building from a wood or something like this, even from like a new materials. I mean, physical materials instead of like a programming which materializes itself through the digital structure.
Yeah, but I still think that yeah, it has a for me great potential, and or at least an interest, you know. And I invite you all to bring that forward. Now we've shared what we've done. Please add on that, share with us, and let's build it up together. So if you don't have it, like, do you have any comments from the participants of the workshop, from our team that we were working together? Do you have any questions, any comments, any feedback?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe relate this discussion to yeah, the exploration that I have been working on, and I was just wondering if, for example, I mean, just going back to the method that we used, where we were subdividing these point clouds using some grid definitions. I think the first step that I would think of would be how the GAN algorithms or the initial data set could inform the generation of this grid. So in my case, these icebergs or ice objects. In the end, the grid that subdivides them is like a big part of the definition of the final outcome. So so how to link in terms of the algorithm, the initial data set with the final object, but without going directly through the image, basically. So what could be the information that could be extracted from the initial data set to inform that? That would not be just pixels.
Yeah, that's very good comment.
I think what something that happened in your style GAN, I think that based on what I know about the GANs, is that I think the white parts of the iceberg become really sensible, that it can be really confusing, it can be really combined with many things that probably you're losing a little bit of the details. which I think was part of the comments of using the satellite version, the satellite images, that it becomes really similar in every image, which I think that in that case, what's really interesting was the perception of the blue part of the ocean, and how like you approach this negative space, and then you probably think on the inverted scenario of the blue space, because the blue did change, because your video started from top right and then moved to the bottom, and I mean it had more change than the white areas of the ice, which I think it could be also a good approach of inverting the negative space and then change it back, so probably you have a little bit more of the extraction. And yeah, I don't know about the other way of making it 3D without the point cloud. I don't know what, like, another possibility for it.
Okay. To be discovered. But again, I think it's very much individual. There is no answer of it should be done this way. No, it's very much comes from what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and how do you drive this forward. So we shared a little step, but of course there is a lot of decision and a lot of reasoning of that should be done and processed, not by the AI, not by the data set, not by the biointelligence, but your human mind. And that's still the driver. And I think that up to you now how to implement this, and what is the what is the scenario, and what is the forces which are shaping the design piece. Yeah. So if there are no other comments, if there are no other questions, I would like to thank everybody for this great workshop. It has been a great pleasure for me to work with you. I know for Tom as well. And it has been a great discussion today. Thank you very much to Claudia, Oscar, and Vadim bringing your thoughts and ideas for us. It's absolutely important to have the feedback, evaluate all together our work, and bring it to the next step. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you,
for the
everyone.
invitation. Really
Thank you for the
Thank
invitation
you.
as well.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.